all you glorious gamers out there. Welcome to the PlayerStoo Podcast, the video game podcast for gamers like you, by gamers like you. You can find PlayerStoo on all the social media, that's Facebook, Twitter, YouTube, Instagram, the lot. You can also find our written content over at PlayersToo.com, that's PlayerStoo.com. And if you could take 5 seconds to give us 5 stars over on Apple Podcasts or wherever you get your podcasts, it really helps us out. It does a huge amount for the exposure of the show, and while you're over there, if you could give us a review as well, again, it just helps us out even more, and thank you so much to anyone that's already done that for us. You're an absolute legend to us. Alright, and on with the show. My name is Mark Anderson. With me, as always, Mr. Lewis Camley. How's it going, Lewis?
It's going okay, Mark. Good to be here again. Good to be talking to you. Bit of a long, tough day today because Twitter has just been full of people getting their new Xboxes, and that's not been our day, has it?
It is Xbox launch day as we are currently recording this. Ironically, most of the news we're about to talk about is about the PlayStation 5. However, that was not intentional on our part. But yes, to anyone that has got their new Series X, happy Xbox Day to you. But Lewis, what have you been playing this week?
Well, Mark, still making my way through the worlds of Hollow Knight, and also continuing my Desperados 3 playthroughs. I've not got too much to say about either of those games this week, really, because Hollow Knight I'm just making slow and steady progress. I've really kind of hit the groove with it, really finding it quite a lot of fun now, not getting tripped up anywhere near as often, and even when that does happen, you know, I did have to fight one boss a couple of times last night that I've still to get past, but it doesn't matter. It's just great fun getting in there and working out what needs done, and those runs are just so enjoyable at the moment. So those have still been my main games this week, hoping that I'll get Hollow Knight more or less polished off, maybe not by the time we record next week, but towards the end of next week, because I've got a wee bit of time off work. But Mark,
nice one, man. That's
what
great.
I have been playing, I had a little shot of the demo for Hyrule Warriors Age of Calamity.
Very cool.
Which is the upcoming Zelda, or Breath of the Wild rather, adjacent game in the same vein as the Dynasty Warriors series, if anyone remembers those. Hyrule Warriors is obviously a bit of a kind of Zelda-inspired version of those types of games, but I had not really paid any attention to the first game at all, and it's only that this second game is connected to the Breath of the Wild lore of Zelda that made me want to check it out. But yeah, as we found out in the Nintendo Direct Mini from last week, there was a demo shadow dropped for that, so I gave it a bash last night, and you know what, Mark? I've never understood what was going on in those types of games. I find I remember playing Dynasty Warrior demos a lot when we were younger on, I guess, like PS2 probably, and just having absolutely no idea what was happening or why or what we were meant to be doing. And this is a bit like that. The objectives are clearer, and obviously being a demo, it is very much holding your hand and explaining to you how to achieve different moves and different techniques. But they're just very button mashing-y games, these, I've always felt, and that is definitely how this felt to me. It was a case of getting started as Link and just slashing the sword around and seeing what crazy stuff could happen. But the way that it's linked up with the Breath of the Wild lore is so interesting. So it gives you a whole kind of story intro, which I won't bother spoiling for anyone who wants to go and play it, but it's quite a neat way of suggesting why we would be back at this moment where the war against Ganon, or the calamity that Ganon creates, is about to happen.
Yeah, it makes total sense within the lore of Breath of the Wild that you would be where you are, you know.
To do
it makes
this,
complete sense in the canon of Breath of the Wild.
Yeah, so effectively you're talking about this big war of sorts that happens before the events of Breath of the Wild, and it's set up really well. I mean, it looks not quite as beautiful as Breath of the Wild because it's a different type of game, but very similar. It seems to be set entirely in the same map. Towards the end of the demo, you get the overworld, and you start to see some of the other systems at play which connect to what Breath of the Wild was doing. So some of that cooking and potion making that is in Breath of the Wild is there in this game, but just in quite a different way. Also things like the Sheikah Slate from Breath of the Wild, that is in this game, and that gives Link certain abilities. But the other really interesting thing that it does is that it lets you switch characters on the fly, and so halfway through this demo it suddenly prompts you to hit up or down on the D-pad and switch characters to play as Impa, who of course in Breath of the Wild is an old woman basically, and an old
that's right,
you know, a friend and a supporter, I guess, of Princess Zelda in that game. In this one she is, you know, the same age as Link, tank basically and is a warrior and can kind of use these crazy spells. Actually, her controls were quite hard to get your head around, to be honest. But yeah, there's just quite a lot going on in it, and it's made me really keen to see a bit more of the final game. I still don't think this is my type of game, really, but I got a real sense of satisfaction of just battering through hordes of moblins, taking down Lizalfos by the ton. The way that it has used things like the ability to surf on your shield that is in Breath of the Wild, that makes an appearance here in quite a specific and really fun way that maps onto this type of game. So there's plenty there for Breath of the Wild fans. I suspect if you're already a fan of Dynasty Warrior type games, there's even more there to enjoy. So it's, worth a look, definitely.
Nice one, man, nice one.
And what about you? What have you been playing?
Well, Lewis, if you remember a few weeks ago or months ago now probably, I picked up Super Mario All-Stars, which is the trilogy of Mario 64, Sunshine and Galaxy. I know that you have played Galaxy, but I have decided to start with Mario 64. Now, this is an old game, it should be said. This is a groundbreaking game, it should also be said. It was one of the first attempts, or one of the best early attempts, to navigate a 3D world. That is how old this game is. And it does play like an old game, I've got to admit. It does really play like an old game. Not helped, of course, by the fact that Nintendo have decided simply to port these games to the Switch rather than trying to do any clever remastering or remaking of the games to make life easier for the modern player, but instead has left it completely as it was. And my complaint largely lies in the same department as your complaints lied with Galaxy, and that is, holy shit, the camera is bad. It's like real bad. Amazingly as well, that having a camera that you can control must have been so novel then that they decided to make a bit of a thing out of it. Like, within the story, the camera, you're supposed to be getting followed around by, I can't even remember the character's name, which is terrible, but one of your like your wee friendly turtle guys is like travelling around on a cloud holding a camera and is supposed to be like following you around as you are on your adventure sort of thing. That's what the camera's supposed to be, which I just thought was quite a novel way of looking at a camera, as opposed to a camera just being a completely fucking standard element of gaming. Like, they felt as if they had to justify it within the story, which I just thought was great. However, the actual using that camera is really shit. Like, I'm not even going to lie, it's not in any way good. It's horrible. Also, the swimming mechanics, Lewis. Holy shit, they are bad. And we've talked about this in numerous games, but this really takes the biscuit. These are actually the worst swimming mechanics I've ever come across in a game. They are shockingly bad.
God.
And if you think that controlling the camera on land is bad, the minute you get any water, it gets 10 times worse. It is nearly uncontrollable. Or I certainly found it very difficult to navigate underwater. Fortunately, there has only been one level that has depended on this so far, and I'm hoping that I don't see a lot more water. But God almighty, Liz. God almighty, it was bad. However, having said all that, and that must sound so negative, and I'm not going to lie to you, it was a frustrating experience at times playing 64. But Lewis, again, similarly to what you said about Galaxy, the heart and soul of this game is so good. It is so good. It's great, and it's wildly colourful. Like, the colour palette on this game is like almost exclusively primary colours. It feels like it is. It is insane how bright and beautiful it is, and for the time, I'm just thinking, like, this must have looked like amazing, absolutely amazing, you know. And when you're playing the game, like, despite all that frustration and despite the camera, like, anytime I failed at a level and I got chucked out of the portrait, I was always like, I'll just try again. Like, it was getting quite late and I was thinking, I'll just try again. I'll do it one more time. I'll do one more level. You know what I mean? I'll go back in and get one more star.
Yeah.
And I was just thinking to myself, like, I found myself being very frustrated at this game, and yet I don't really want to put it down. Like, I want to go back and play it now. After we record this podcast, I'm going to go and play it.
Yeah.
So I don't know, like, these games just have some magic to them. I don't know what it is. Like, it's very difficult to put your finger on. They're just whimsical and fun, and they're very basic in their mechanics. I mean, in reality, I was saying to you just off air, like, the differences on a mechanical level between this and Odyssey, like, really aren't that great considering how far apart those two games came out. Like, it feels as if Odyssey is just Mario 64 with modern technology.
Absolutely,
you know what I mean?
yeah.
And for that, it just feels great, man. It just feels good to play. When you're not fighting with the camera, and when you nail like a couple of really good jumps back to back, you're like, yes, I've absolutely nailed that. Or when you go up to a boss, and all the bosses have been relatively easy so far, but you just go up there and you just kick his arse easy. It's just great. Like, it just feels good for some reason. Like, Mario just inspires joy for some reason, and I am genuinely looking forward to going back and playing it despite all its flaws. And I am completely willing to admit that these flaws are a result of the age of the game. There's no two ways about that. That is absolutely what it is. And this game in its heyday was one of the most important games ever made. So I'm definitely not trying to detract from people who think about it fondly.
So much of what you just said was echoed in my experience of playing Galaxy, and I think that the final point there is so crucial. Like, these games are phenomenal, and they've been let down, I think, by Nintendo's kind of lack of action really on this remaster.
Yeah, absolutely.
But yeah, at their core, these are genuinely brilliant games that are just let down a bit by modern standards of camera control in particular. Certainly swimming was a big issue in Galaxy as well. There's letdowns, but there's still genius there, I think, is the key.
Absolutely, man. Genius is definitely still there. Definitely. Alright, listen, with that, time for the news. Alright, news item number 1. BioWare have confirmed that they are developing a new Mass Effect game and that the fabled Mass Effect Trilogy remaster is real. This is excellent news for Mass Effect fans since they have had no news on the series since Andromeda, and let's face it, that was pretty bad at launch anyway. BioWare head Casey Hudson has made this statement about the announcements.
For many months now, our team at BioWare has been hard at work updating the textures, shaders, models, effects and technical features of 3 enormous games. Our goal was not to remake or reimagine the original games, but to modernise the experience so that fans and new players can experience the original work in its best possible form. It's been amazing to see the adventures of Commander Shepard take on a new life in super sharp resolution, faster frame rates and beautiful visual enhancements. As game developers, we always hope that our games will transcend their original platforms. Having the opportunity to remaster the trilogy means that the fruits of a decade of our work will live on and will be experienced better and clearer than ever before.
So, first of all, sticking with the remasters, it is critical to point out as well that they are remasters and that they are not remakes. But honestly, I believe that these remakes have basically been willed into existence by the fans of the franchise, just simply by going on about having a Mass Effect Trilogy remake for so long. I feel as if I've heard about having a Mass Effect Trilogy remake for 10 years, and at some point along the way I think EA have said, oh, do you know what would be a good idea? If we gave all those fans that thing that they wanted. And good for you, Mass Effect fans, because I genuinely think that this is on you and that the development of this game started because people just wanted it so much. So, big win there, I think. The trilogy will include the first 3 games and all their DLC, but will not include Andromeda. And will include all promo weapons, armour and packs, and all will be optimised for 4K Ultra HD. Interesting thing is that the game will be coming out on spring 2021 on current gen consoles, with forward compatibility and targeted enhancements, quotes, for the next gen, which very much sounds like they are bringing out a current gen game on next gen hardware. But because this is a remake, I sort of don't care about that, you know? Mass Effect always feels like one of the bigger series of games that I've missed out on. The big 3 for me always used to be Uncharted, which I very recently played, BioShock, which I've still not played, and Mass Effect. They always felt like the big 3 that I'd sort of missed out on in being a gamer, you know? And I know that you're sort of the same. Are you interested in playing this?
I'm not certain at the moment, to be honest, Mark. Exactly as you just said, I have missed Mass Effect. It's always sat there as one for me that until fairly recently, didn't even know too much about. And so there's nothing about this announcement that makes me really excited, other than, as you were saying, excited for existing Mass Effect fans that they have effectively willed this into existence, that they've demanded it, they've been talking about it for so long. There's been so many rumours that, I mean, I'm sure EA are also just looking at the bottom line and going, we know we could ship a ton of these. Oh yeah,
absolutely. EA are always looking at the bottom line.
Well, exactly.
They're always looking at the bottom line.
and how to extend that bottom line as deep as it can possibly go. But yeah, I think that's the thing here. Like, for fans, it's brilliant. For me personally, I'm interested. Like, I want to see these remasters when we start to see footage from them. I want to know how they've upgraded it. I also want to know what they're keeping the same as the original games, because I like that statement actually from Casey Hudson when he's saying we've not set out to fully reimagine this, remake it from the ground up. What we're trying to do is make these classic games that a lot of people loved playable now, basically. I mean, the first Mass Effect came out in 2007, I think, so, you know, it's the same,
pretty old now.
Basically the same as the first Uncharted game, which you, when you replayed it recently, said, like, you can fucking tell, basically.
Yeah, no, you can absolutely tell, yeah, totally.
So yeah, I think when this drops, particularly if there's not too much to play at that point, I'll definitely take a look. I can't say for certain whether I would be interested enough to play it, though.
I must admit, I'm pretty interested in playing it. I would like to go back back and play that franchise. I just know that so many people care so much about it, you know, and there's a reason for that.
Absolutely,
basically.
yeah.
And I know that it's a good series. I know that it's a series that I will enjoy. It's the sort of game that I will enjoy. It's just that at the time when it was originally out, for whatever reason, it just passed me by. It just wasn't something that I was particularly interested in playing at that moment.
Exactly,
you know?
that, yeah.
So as for the new game, Lewis, Casey Hudson has said that it will be worked on by a, quotes, veteran team. But, as I've alluded to several times here, the last installment, Andromeda, wasn't very good, at launch anyway. I think that is a fair statement. And the game that they made immediately after that, Lewis, was Anthem. Do you think BioWare have to win the fans back a little bit? Because their recent big budget AAA games have not been up to scratch in any capacity, let's be honest.
Well, yeah, I mean, basically, yes. I don't know. It's not a like for like, you know, you're not trying to win back the people who were scorned by Anthem necessarily. And obviously what you are doing here is serving a whole heap of fans who loved these games when they were originally released. You're not necessarily even trying to make anything up to those fans necessarily. They do have to get this right, though. I think the reputation of BioWare has taken a bit of a knock. Yeah, I don't know. It just feels to me a bit like this is what made them, and this is kind of almost like a way that they can relaunch by having the trilogy come out and a new game and kind of saying, yeah, this is what BioWare is about. But if it has any of the issues that Anthem had particularly, that's not great, you know.
Yeah, definitely not. Even if it had any of the issues that Andromeda had, which was a far more single player focused game, you know what I mean? They didn't have the amount of servers that Anthem had to deal with and all the network and stuff and all problems that are generated from that side, you know what I mean? It just felt as though Mass Effect Andromeda was put out unfinished, basically, and that's not really on, you know what I mean? And you will pay for that. The fans will hit back at that, and they hit back in a big way about Andromeda. So yeah, I kind of agree. Like, I think that with this and Dragon Age 4, which is also coming, they sort of have to get them right, because as you said, I think that the studio's reputation is now sort of on the line, you know? And it is also worth pointing out that because of Dragon Age 4 and Mass Effect being announced with no trailer, and I think we got a couple of pieces of concept art, basically, I think that both these games are a pretty long way away, let's be honest. Alright, news item number 2. Sony have confirmed that the PS5 won't support SSD storage expansions at launch, and that there is no way to move PlayStation 5 games to external storage. Now, taking these one at a time. Firstly, the SSD storage expansion. So obviously back in March, Mark Cerny talked about the fact that you could buy off-the-shelf SSD storage and put it into the PlayStation 5 as long as it was good enough basically to work with the PlayStation 5. But I'm sort of surprised that this is being made into a big deal, because it's actually completely in line with what Mark Cerny said back in March, because he said that this feature, this add-on storage, would come, quotes, a bit past launch. The reason for that seems to be that PlayStation will be compatibility testing all M2 SSD such that it fits into the PlayStation 5 and that it meets the extremely high standards PlayStation require for it to work with their extremely fast internal SSD. The Verge, whose article I am referencing for this, and links as always over at the show notes at PlayersToo.com, spoke to all the manufacturers of PCIe Gen 4 SSD drives. I hope you know what those letters mean, because I sure as hell don't. But there are only a handful of manufacturers actually making these drives at the moment, so there wasn't a massive amount of people to talk to. None of them could confirm that their SSD would work with the PlayStation 5, but it seems that the reason for that is because PlayStation haven't actually started their compatibility testing program with these manufacturers, and 2 of them actually confirmed that they hadn't started their program. However, several of them did seem to be optimistic that their drives would meet the PS5 standard and would fit in the available slot effectively for the expansion of storage. The reason why I was saying that I didn't really understand why this was a big deal is that we know that this is coming, you know? Like, we know that we're getting this feature. It's a literal hardware feature of the PlayStation 5, and PlayStation have said that this is reserved for a future update. And we already knew that it was coming past launch because of what Mark Cerny said way back in the day, but I think that obviously this issue has just been magnified by the fact that the PlayStation 5 has comparatively small internal storage in comparison to the Series X. So I suppose, what do you think of this?
Like you said, it's something that people broadly have been aware of since that showcase earlier in the year. I think that the reason it's come back to light a bit here is that obviously Sony have reconfirmed it, but there will be a lot of people out there that, one, have forgotten some of this stuff, and two, that weren't aware in the first place. We are very switched on all the machinations of this over the past 12 months or more, but your average gamer isn't. And so I think that, Sony have left themselves open here to headlines which, for people who aren't fully versed in this stuff, seem alarming. The idea that there isn't an option for expanding your storage and the games can't be moved. So
yeah, at launch though, I mean, to be honest, most people are responsible with their headlines, and it is at launch, and that is made clear. And hopefully these people would actually read the article and find out why that is.
That's not the internet, though.
I mean, who knows? But speaking about the fact that you cannot move PlayStation 5 games from your PlayStation 5's internal storage onto external storage. You also cannot play games on your PlayStation 5 from external storage, basically because those games require access to the SSD, and if they're running off a hard drive, that totally negates the point in the SSD, doesn't it? You also cannot store PlayStation 5 save data on an external storage, at least at launch. Neither of these issues affect PlayStation 4 games, it should be pointed out. So if you play any PlayStation 4 games on the PlayStation 5, all of this is fine. It's just for PlayStation 5 games. However, PlayStation have now said that explorations for allowing players to store but not play PlayStation 5 games on a USB drive in a future update are underway. E.g., they are looking into it, basically. What do you make of this? Again, this seems like something I would be surprised if they didn't sort it out pretty quick. It seems like it was made a big deal of. To be honest with you, it seems like something that should have been there in the first place. And the way that they're talking about how they're looking into it, basically, it seems as though the system is capable of it,
That's the thing for me, though. That's the bizarreness of this whole kind of news story, is that, these things seem like they should be possible, and that they are currently possible in the current gen, so why aren't they being brought forward to the new generation as standard, basically? These things will come down the line, that's fair enough, and completely accept that, the notion of trying to play a PS5 game, a native PS5 game, from a hard disk rather than from the SSD, obviously that won't work and shouldn't work, basically.
No.
But to my mind, you should be able to move your games around as in how you see fit. If you want to take all your PS5 games from your SSD and stick them on a hard drive and put that in a drawer because you want to load up 10 new PS5 games, that should be possible as far as I'm concerned. I don't know anything about the tech background of this as to why maybe that was a challenge. Maybe they just don't think anyone's going to touch the sides of the storage very quickly. And, when they say quotes down the line, they might be talking about in January. But to me, that's a sort of an indefinite amount of time. That could mean the end of next year before we start to see changes which allow you proper access and proper control over your own console's storage space,
Well, to be honest with you, I would be surprised if it was as soon as January. I reckon it will probably be into next year before we get an update on this, which, isn't ideal, I'm not going to lie, but I don't know. To me, it's not a big deal because that's always how I've dealt with games. I'm not someone who likes to have all their games downloaded in a big huge library there. Like, I'm quite happy that when I'm finished the game, I'll just delete it, I'll download another one. Like, that to me isn't a big deal, but I understand that it is for a lot of people, and that's a totally valid position to have as well, by the way. I'm not trying to say anything against that. It's just, for me personally, I'm just like, I don't care. Like, I'm not getting excited about this. You know what I mean? But I do hope that they do that, because there's no reason for it not to be there, It's just, they've just arbitrarily decided that we're not doing this.
Yeah, it's just hasn't been priority, basically.
No. And it's also, as you said, it's just another excuse for people to write negative headlines about you that you're just letting drop 2 days before your console's going to launch in the US and a lot of the world, and a little over a week here, And similarly, and I'm going to just drop this in here because I don't really know where else to drop it in, but similarly, the PS5 won't support 440p resolution out of the box, whereas the Xbox Series X will. It will either be upscaled from 1080 or downscaled from 4K. This really doesn't affect you if you play on your TV. It really only affects you if you play on a monitor and you want it to be at 1440p. But they have also said that if they get enough requests, they will add it in. They will update it so that the system can do it. And they've even said that there's no technological reason why they can't do it. So why aren't you doing it? Do you know what I mean? Like, why isn't it just there then? Like, if you can easily update it, if you get an arbitrary number of requests again to do it, then why not just do it in the first place? You know what I mean? Why give journalists the opportunity to write negative headlines about you? And that's not any play on the journalists. Like, the journalists have an obligation to report this stuff to their audience.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? They're doing their job. but why would you give journalists the opportunity to write negative shit about you on the week before your console launches, or in certain parts of the world 2 days before your console launches as we record this, you know?
Well, exactly that. Within that, again, just to look at that dichotomy between really engaged players and people who know technology quite well, and a lot of people who don't. And so if you just see a headline or a bit of an article that says 1440p won't be supported here, but it will be on Xbox, you go, oh, well, why is that happening? And that's your takeaway from it, you know?
And the reason for that is no reason, though. They've said that. The reason is no reason. They just decided not to do it. They decided to prioritise TV play, which...
Fair enough, in a way.
Right, whatever. But there's no reason why there can't be a Switch there to have it at 1440. It's irrelevant. And again, I'm just going to drop this in here because I don't know where else to drop it in our news items. But PlayStation have also surprise dropped a PlayStation 5 remote play app on the PlayStation 4, which will allow you to stream next-gen games onto the PlayStation 4, which is really cool, but has never been mentioned before. They've never mentioned that. That's like a really excellent feature that they've just never mentioned. Why haven't you mentioned that? And the only reason that I can think of that they haven't mentioned that is because if you're streaming PS5 games to your PS4, then you'll be able to play on your PS4 with a DualShock 4, which again they have arbitrarily decided will not work with the PlayStation 5. But it is obvious that that controller would work with any PlayStation 5 game because it's the exact same fucking button layout. So you will in fact be able to use a DualShock 4 to play a PlayStation 5 game. You will just have to go through your PlayStation 4 to do it, effectively. Absolutely fucking bizarre, man.
I mean, I can't imagine how many people would bother doing that, but...
I wouldn't imagine that you'd be doing it for the reason to use a DualShock 4, obviously. But it obviously can be done.
Yeah.
And the PlayStation have just decided on the PlayStation 5, no, DualShock 4 is not allowed over here. DualSense only. And there's no reason for that. The only reason for that is because they want you to buy a DualSense. That's literally it. Alright, news item number 3, and more PlayStation Lewis, and more me being annoyed at PlayStation. A PlayStation executive and head of platform planning, Hideki Nishiro, has said that it will be important to have cross-gen games for 3 years as players transition to the PlayStation 5. I'm referencing a VGC article here. Again, links over on the show notes over at PlayersToo.com. But it is worth noting that these comments came from an interview with Japanese website AV Watch and have subsequently been translated from Japanese. Now, there are currently over 110 million PS4s in the wild. Sony absolutely will be putting effort into supporting those consoles, rightfully so, and also because there's a lot of money in there. But 3 years? 3 years! That is far too long. Far too long. This is exactly what we were criticising Xbox for, Lewis. Exactly what we were criticising Xbox for. And PlayStation were given it, specifically Jim Ryan was given it, we believe in generations, we want a nice clean break, we want everyone to transition to the new console. But if this is true, every word of that is fucking bullshit. Every word of that is a lie. And honestly, I think that if this is true, I think that they were just saying that to be contrarian to Xbox's message. It was sort of what they did last time round, right? Xbox were going for this home console. There was a media unit that did everything, and PlayStation were very much for the gamers, you know what I mean? Whereas Xbox are trying to get as many people involved in their ecosystem and whatever, and we're like, no, all moving on to the new console. But they're not. They're doing exactly the same thing. Like, exactly the same fucking thing.
It does seem that way, yeah, from what we're hearing around this stuff. 3 years is, way longer than...
astonishingly long.
than I think that we thought it would be, definitely. It's an interesting one, because there are games within this that we know, for instance, Demon's Souls, a launch game for the PS5, that aren't going to be cross-generational. So I guess there's a slight
and
difference.
Ratchet & Clank's another one that has been confirmed by Insomniac not to be on the PlayStation 4. That will be a PlayStation 5 exclusive game.
Yeah. And that game in particular seems to be one that is making use of the power of the PS5. So if that remains true, let's hope it does remain true, then that's great. And there's still a bit of a difference between what Xbox are doing and what PlayStation are doing. It just seems that PlayStation are making fairly arbitrary decisions, potentially informed by the capabilities of the games themselves, but fairly arbitrary decisions around what games get to be exclusives and what games have to be cross-generational. I basically suspect that a lot of that decision making will come down to how many units they would expect to still sell on the PS4. So a game like Horizon I think that they will still expect that of your 100 plus million PS4 units, a fair number of them would still be interested in buying that game. Whereas maybe Ratchet and Clank, maybe Demon's Souls, they know that the audiences are a bit more limited, and so they want to really focus on what the PS5 hardware can do. But yeah, it's another mixed message. It's not ideal.
It is another mixed message, Lewis. It is more shit marketing, quite frankly, by PlayStation. They really want to have a look at their marketing team. They should hire you. That's what they should do. They should hire you, and then you should hire me, and then we can sort it all out. PlayStation have also confirmed this week that Gran Turismo 7, Ratchet & Clank and Returnal would be coming out in the first half of next year, but that Horizon Forbidden West wouldn't be coming out until the second half of next year. A game that I thought would be out sooner because it is a cross-gen game, which was a disappointment to hear when that was first announced, but also seems to be ringing true to this statement that it's going to be well into next year, and we're still getting PlayStation exclusives that are cross-gen titles. God of War Ragnarok is also coming out in 2021, presumably late, and if that were released on the PlayStation 4 again, that would be really disappointing, because that very much lies in the same arena as Horizon Forbidden West, more so even, that more people will probably want to play that game, you know, and they might want to get the next installment of God of War to those 110 million gamers. But I really hope that's not the case. I really hope that they use that as something that you can only play on the PlayStation 5 and come over here to our shiny new console, because I really want to see what Santa Monica and that God of War team can do with this new power. So right now, as you said, the only exclusives on the PlayStation 5 that I am aware of that are exclusive to the PlayStation 5 console is Ratchet & Clank and Demon's Souls. But as you said, I just don't really understand why only them, you know?
I can see why Ratchet and Clank might be, from what we've seen of it. As we've said before, it does look like it's using that power, but I don't know about Demon's Souls. I mean, I literally just don't know enough about the game to know maybe there are things there that when fully up-resed and all that, they do require the power of the PS5. But Demon's Souls is the odd one to me, where it feels like that game probably could run on a PS4. I don't really see why it couldn't. So yeah, just a lot of strange, or not, maybe not even strange, just not well communicated or not very transparent decisions around where they're placing games at the moment from Sony. Hopefully that'll start to be cleared up a bit though.
Yeah, I'm hoping that by the end of next year, all the games that are announced that are coming beyond that point are going to be PlayStation 5 only, basically. Alright, Lewis, and news item number 4, and sticking with the next gen, launch games, Lewis. The embargo for a lot of launch games has lifted, and this is something that we usually do in our shout-out section. However, instead of ramming all of this into the shout-outs, we thought we'll put them all together and we'll make them a news item instead. So here we go. Starting off with the only Xbox Series X exclusive on this list, although it has also come out on the PlayStation 4, so I'm not really sure how much you can claim that, is Yakuza Like a Dragon. It's currently sitting at an 82 on PC, an 89 on Xbox One, an 86 on Xbox Series X, and an 84 on the PS4. It does not come out on the PS5 until March next year. From reading some of the reviews, it seems to have been really positively received. The game has a new cast and, more interestingly, a new turn-based battle system, which people seem to have responded really positively to, which is something that I was concerned about a game. I mean, when a game is shaking things up in a big way, you're always quite concerned that those shake-ups are going to land badly with the fans, you know? But these changes seem to be really refreshing without losing the heart and soul of what the game is, you know? And more importantly, it seems to be pretty fun. Despite all the noise that has recently been made about the Yakuza series, it has never really been something that has interested me in the slightest. But yeah, this one seems to have landed really well indeed.
It certainly has. I'm much the same as you, that the series broadly has kind of passed me by, although I keep hearing really positive things, like some of the reviews of this installment have been, and thinking, I should really give that a bash at some point. I think it's really going to benefit as well from having a lot of that early Xbox Series X preview coverage be kind of focused on it, because it was one of the only games to play that was quite new to people. So it would be really interesting to see if this actually cuts through and gets an even sort of bigger audience and a bigger following than it's had up till now.
Absolutely, man. Next up was Bugsnax, Lewis, everyone's favourite fever dream. It's currently sitting at a 79 on the PS4 and a 73 on the PS5. The game seems to play as advertised, basically, in that it is mad, it's wacky, it's fun, and it's quite charming. let's face it, if you were going to play this game, the Metacritic score does not matter to you. Do not be a slave to that Metacritic. The game looks absolutely wild, and if you were attracted to it because of that, go and fucking play it. Right now, it's also free on the PlayStation 5, so if you are lucky enough to get a PlayStation 5 this month, then you can pick it up for free, and you absolutely might as well.
Yeah, can't say any more than that, really. It's there and available for you if you're getting your PS5 just now. Hopefully that will still be available to more players down the line. I don't think we're going to get regular PS5 games added to the PS Plus subscription at launch, to be honest, so I wouldn't be stunned if we see a bit of what they've said is going to happen with Destruction All-Stars for this game. So yeah, it's just going to be on your console when you get it. Give it a bash. Why not? Some people are enjoying it, so there must be something fun about it,
Absolutely. A lot of people are enjoying it, man. It was genuinely a positive reviews, even though those scores might look quite middling, but it's the type of game it is,
Exactly.
Next up, Spider-Man Miles Morales, Lewis. Currently sitting at an 84 on the PS4 and an 85 on the PS5. People are very positive about it, basically, which is great because I really, really, really want to play it. It's obviously a shorter title than the original, and it seems that nothing much is surprising anyone. It's basically more Spider-Man. But to me, that is not a problem at all. And it seems that in the execution, they have absolutely nailed it, basically. It seems to feel familiar enough to people who have played the original, but is more than capable of standing on its own as well, which is very good to hear. And it also includes an improved battle system, which is something that definitely was lacking in the original game. Thoughts on this one? Still not enough to buy a PlayStation 5 at launch, Lewis?
Not in and of itself, no. I mean, I'm not saying it's not a reason to buy a PS5, but yeah, I'm as excited as anyone about this game. Possibly not as excited as you, right enough, but
hey.
It's 10 more hours basically of Spider-Man PS4 is how I keep looking at it, with some improvements. And so if you need it on the PS5, buy the PS5, play it there. If you really, really want to play it, but you don't want to spend $500 right now, play it on the PS4. For me, I'm going to wait, and it'll probably be the first thing I play on PS5, but that doesn't necessarily mean that I'm going to buy a PS5 on launch day, which, by the way, is tied partly to the stuff that we were talking about earlier. Just, there's so much that has come out in the last 7 days about the PS5 that I think that makes a good argument to wait until people are playing these things before you buy them,
Well, I mean, you're still getting the same unit. I mean, whether you buy it on launch day or you buy it 3 months later, it's the same thing.
Well, but they may have switched on expandable storage by then, etc., etc.
Alright, after that is Astro's Playroom, which is currently sitting at an 82 on PlayStation 5. I suppose this technically counts, Lewis, as another exclusively PlayStation 5 game that cannot be played anywhere else. I have seen more than one review call it delightful, which I think for a tech demo that is preloaded onto the PlayStation 5 is a pretty good comment to have. It achieves its primary purpose pretty well, which is essentially showing off the DualSense controller. But it does it in such a way that is amusing, is playful, and is charming people, basically. I'm not going to ask you, Lewis, if you're going to play this, because you probably will play it, and I will play it, and anyone who gets a PlayStation 5 will probably play it because it's preloaded on there, and it effectively shows you what you should expect from your DualSense controller. And actually, this might end up being one of the most played PlayStation games ever, simply because of that.
Yeah.
But anyway, I'm glad that they went to the effort, not just to show off the tech, but actually go out their way to create an enjoyable experience while doing that. And also, Astro is awesome, and I want to see him in a full-blown non-VR game very soon, please. Alright, and after that was The Pathless. Now, this has had fairly limited reviews as of this recording, but it's currently sitting at an 84 on the PlayStation 4 and an 81 on the PlayStation 5. The reviews so far have praised the odd traversal system and the exploration-focused adventuring. So far as I'm aware, there is no map or there is no waypoints of any kind in this game. And that is one of the things I was worried about, along with the traversal system. So to see both of those things being praised is really, really good, because otherwise this would basically just have been a Breath of the Wild clone, wouldn't it have? But honestly, I think it looks great. Like, I really hope that I can get around to playing it at some point.
Oh, it's definitely one of the ones I'm most excited about that's coming up, to be honest. From that last trailer we saw of it, the kind of fairly extended gameplay sequences, I think it looks really interesting. These reviews started dropping just before we started recording, so I've not even properly read any yet, and I'll be really interested to know what people are thinking about it, and particularly with that Breath of the Wild comparison in mind. But at the moment, it's high up there for me in terms of games that I'm looking forward to.
Nice one, man, nice one. And after that, the big third party, I suppose, that is launching this week is Assassin's Creed Valhalla. Currently sitting at an 85 on PC, at an 81 on PS4, an 82 on Xbox One, and an 85 on Xbox Series X. There's going to be a lot of these to read out in the future, I've just realised. The game seems to be pretty damn good, actually. Like, it seems to be a very, very good game. And it's definitely continuing on the positive track since the soft reboot that was Origins, and then we had Odyssey, and now we've got Valhalla, and it seems to be continuing on that positive road away from the Assassin's Creed of olds, which were slowly turning into horror shows. The combat seems to be pretty good, the story seems to be pretty good, exploration seems to be pretty good, and by all accounts it's a pretty stunning world to explore as well, which is great. Although it's definitely not really a world beater anymore, Assassin's Creed really, I mean, I doubt it will be taking home any Game of the Year awards in reality, but if you're a fan of the series, I think that this will be a pretty good installment for you. Do you think you'll ever give it a go?
I could totally imagine giving it a go. I don't really see myself putting in the, likely 80 hours or whatever it'll take to really beat the full game, but previously loved Assassin's Creed and then fell out of love with it quite hard, and I haven't seen anything about Valhalla that tempts me enough to come back. To be totally honest, Mark, I'm still more interested in playing Watch Dogs Legion.
Me too.
Because it has something kind of fresh and interesting about it, even if it's a buggy mess and not particularly fun to play, as some people have been saying. But
yeah, it's just an interesting mechanic it's got going
exactly,
on,
and I don't know that Valhalla is introducing anything that really grabs me as something particularly exciting.
Yeah, absolutely. Alright, listen, finishing off as we always do with a couple of shout-outs, and it literally is a couple of shout-outs this week. Shout-out number 1, the dual reality horror game The Medium has been delayed. The game was initially supposed to release on December the 10th, but has now been delayed until January the 28th. The dev team has made this statement on Twitter.
After much careful thought and consideration, today we have made the difficult decision to delay the launch of The Medium to January 28th, 2021. It wasn't an easy choice to make, but one made due to the COVID-19 situation in Poland, as well as the current schedule of other games on the market. Bloober Team remains committed to delivering our biggest, most ambitious, fear-inducing experience to date. The additional development time will allow us to add further polish, ensuring we deliver our innovative, genre-pushing vision of interactive psychological horror. Rest assured, the delay will not stop us sharing information with you, and you can expect us to unravel a few more layers of the medium's great mystery soon. Stay tuned and stay safe.
So basically it was down to COVID, and although they don't name names, it was that Cyberpunk was moved to launch on exactly the same day because of its delay. And that sucks. That really sucks. Not that I think that Cyberpunk were in any way doing that maliciously to force the medium to move, but directly because of their delay, another Polish studio has had to move their game by nearly 2 months just to get out of the way of your absolute juggernaut of a title, after Christmas as well, which I'm sure was a big decision,
That's a fair point. I hadn't really thought about the loss of Christmas sales and what the impact of that would be. It makes sense to get out of Cyberpunk's way, but it's not fair really on Bloober Team that they've had to do this.
You know what that is that, again, I don't think that CDPR did that in any way maliciously.
No, not at all.
Although I would have liked to think that they might have been in contact with their other Polish studios to say, this is going to be happening, guys. But yeah, it just sucks, and it just isn't fair, But again, I don't really think anybody's in the wrong, so to speak. It's just that it just sucks. It just sucks. Alright, and shout out number 2. This is more of a PSA more than anything else. Amazon have sent out emails to some customers that they will not be receiving their Series X on launch day, which is today as we record this, so I assume that you will already know if you're one of these people, definitely by the time this podcast comes out, and that you could have to wait until December the 31st to get your Series X. Now, obviously, that is fucking shit, and Amazon have clearly taken more pre-orders than they could actually fulfill. And for a company with the reputation of Amazon, I can only assume that that is just utter greed. So if you haven't got your Series X today, that fucking sucks. Like, genuinely, I feel pretty bad for you. But I would be getting on to Amazon immediately to complain loudly and consistently until they get you your Xbox, because you have pre-ordered with them and they have not held up their end of the bargain. And for anyone that has ordered a PS5 on Amazon, I would expect exactly the same bullshit in 2 days if you're in the US, or next week if you're here in the UK. But Lewis, the next gen is literally upon us. Literally today, as we record this podcast, is the dawn of the next gen, which is pretty cool.
It is pretty cool, yeah. It's an exciting time. It's definitely a good time to be doing a gaming podcast. So let's just wait until PS5 arrives here as well, and it will finally be the moment.
It will finally be the moment, man. and there'll be lots and lots and lots of news to talk about, which is going to be awesome and quite scary to do the show notes for this podcast. So there we go. All right, ladies and gentlemen, it's time for a beer and we'll be back with Topic of the Week. And we are back for Topic of the Week. Topic of the Week this week is, what does the next generation hold for Xbox, Lewis?
That is right, Mark. Well, we couldn't possibly not mark today, which is, as we were saying, the day of the launch of the Xbox Series X here in the UK and everywhere, without talking properly about Xbox when we've spent so much of the show talking about PlayStation.
Yeah, I think that's fair. I think this is fair.
And so I just wanted to have a bit of a chat about where we think we are with Xbox. We are right on the cusp of this next generation. Quite an exciting moment. We know everything now that there is to know about the Xbox, basically. This has been months of reveals and game showcases and system updates and statements by Phil Spencer that don't really mean anything and some that do mean something. And all of that is all culminating today, basically. But I want to drag you back a wee bit first and talk about the current generation and about the Xbox One, which has been a difficult generation, I think it's fair to say, for Xbox. Certainly the first few years of the generation, they didn't have a great launch. The Kinect was a bit of a disaster. They did sell roughly half, I think, of what the total units of PlayStation have been by the end of the generation. But in the last year or two, things are getting better, right? The move towards focusing on services rather than just exclusive games has been a major thing, and we'll definitely be talking about that as we go on. They've clawed back a lot of that fan support that they maybe were lacking at the start of the generation by making very pro-consumer, pro-gamer moves. So here we are. Now we know what the strategy is. We know what they're doing. 2 consoles, quite a different SKU. They're really leaning heavily into Game Pass. Talking a bit about the games, the systems, the strategy behind it all, the services that Xbox offer. Just headline, Mark, what are your feelings about this upcoming generation for Xbox? How's it going to go? What does it look like? Are people going to love it?
Well, I think that it's going to go better than the launch of the Xbox One went. I mean, I think that it's almost impossible to do worse. Do you know what I mean? I think since the PlayStation 3, we've never seen such a bad launch. Do you know what I mean? I think that Xbox are in a really good position, basically. They've won a lot of people over with Xbox Game Pass, and rightly so, because it's a fantastic service at a fantastic price. I think that they are right to lean into that. I think that they are right to bring out a far, far cheaper console in the Series S that is effectively a Games Pass machine. I think that was a genius move, quite frankly. Ultimately, I think that the PlayStation 5 is going to outsell the Series X and the Series S combined, or the two PlayStation 5s combined will outsell the Series X and the Series S. At least at launch. I think what we could see here is an initial surge of PlayStation 5s, and then over the years, I think that there's a good chance that these two consoles get closer together, you know, as a lot of people buy an Xbox Series S specifically as a secondary console, or even just buy a Series X as a secondary console. You know what I mean? A lot of people can't afford to just drop £1,000 basically on 2 consoles at the one time, you know, so I think a lot of people are favouring the PlayStation 5 just because they're on the PlayStation 4 ecosystem just now. All their friends are there, all their trophies are there, all their games are there. So I think a lot of people are favouring that just now, but ultimately I think that this will probably be a very close generation, or probably one of the closest generations that we've had in a very, very long time, and that for Xbox is a massive win.
Oh, absolutely. I mean, closing that gap, and it is a substantial gap just now. I mean, there's no doubt about it that would be, even if they don't outsell the PlayStation, even by the end of the generation, if you can close that gap that exists, that is a major step forward for them. Why do you think that is, Mark? What are you putting that success down to if it were to happen? Why is it that people are going to be buying a Series X or a Series S?
Games Pass. Honestly,
it's pure and simple.
That's the reason. That's the reason I'm going to buy one.
Yeah. I mean, I really think it's hard to overstate how important Game Pass is going to be to gaming, not just to Xbox over the next few years, but to gaming more broadly. I really think that it is the disruptor in the industry just now. It is the thing that makes me nervous right now, as you love to call me every week, as a Sony pony. I worry a bit that PlayStation is resting on its laurels, is coming into this as the behemoth, and knows that people will fall follow because of the games that are available. And as you've said plenty of times, it's unthinkable not to be playing the next God of War. It's unthinkable not to be playing the next The Last of Us or whatever.
Absolutely.
But I really think that Game Pass for me, it's the breadth. It's not necessarily that it's going to have Bethesda games on it, say, or it's going to have Halo on it. For me, it's that there's such a selection of games there to dip in and out of, to try and find new favourites. I think that when people who aren't really switched on to gaming start to understand, start to see other people using Game Pass, start to hear Game Pass as a much bigger part of the wider public discourse around games, in the way that Netflix has become the ubiquitous word for television, really, particularly in our generation.
Yeah. No, I agree, man. Like, not only do I think that is coming, but I think that that's probably coming in a big way, particularly as we go into the new generation, you know what I mean? And Xbox are just doubling down on Games Pass. And I think that that's a good strategy. I mean, I understand what you're saying about PlayStation as well. We've seen in the PS3 generation that they were absolutely resting on their laurels, came into the next generation and absolutely shat the bed, and Xbox ran away with that generation, and rightly so, because PlayStation made some terrible decisions. But now it seems as though both companies are making good decisions right now. It's just that PlayStation are going down the route that they have in recent years relied on, and that is the power of their exclusives. And in reality, I don't think that this is a bad route to go down. I mean, the power of exclusives is what's seen Nintendo continue to be of relevance for the past 30 years. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah.
That is the reason why they are there. So I don't think that that's a bad way to go about it at all. I just think that the way that Xbox is going around it is just so new and interesting, and I think that what they're offering in Games Pass is great. Like, I do. I mean, we say it all the time on here. It's the best deal in gaming, and it absolutely is the best deal in gaming. And quite frankly, right now, I think that a Series S as a next-gen console and a Games Pass subscription is the best deal in gaming.
I mean, that's a really interesting way to put it, yeah, because, I mean, certainly for both of us, we've said before, Series S purchase is quite likely for each of us as that secondary console. We've also spoken a lot over the months, Mark, about this possible problem of the Series S holding back the potential of the Series X. Taking everything into account, taking in the Game Pass strategy, taking in what PlayStation are doing by only having effectively one model, one full power unit, disk drive or otherwise, taking all of that into consideration, do you think that this split console approach from Xbox is the right one? Do you think it's going to be a success, or do you think it might lead to more problems than it's worth?
Well, it's interesting about holding back games. I know that developers have vocalised their opinions on what they feel about that, and it isn't necessarily positive. I suppose it remains to be seen about that. I think from a consumer standpoint and from Xbox's standpoint, I think that this is a very good decision. They are targeting a market that wouldn't necessarily be able to afford a new console right away, but are still passionate gamers and still want to play the next gen stuff. Or gamers like me and you who are going to end up buying one as a secondary console. And Phil Spencer himself has said that he and his team, I suppose, anticipate that the Series S might outsell the Series X ultimately, and that's something that I said way back exactly because of this reason. Like, a lot of people could buy a Series S simply because they can't afford the more expensive console, but they still want to be part of this conversation, they still want to be part of the next gen now. And for people buying secondary consoles and having, as we said, that Games Pass machine there just ready to go, a subscription just ticking away, and a lot of games just at your fingertips, just ready to play. Do you know what I mean? If you're buying a Series S, I don't think that you're buying that console for super high-end gaming. Do you know what I mean? If you want to get the best out of Halo Infinite, you should buy a Series X. If you want to get the best out of the next Gears of War, you should buy a Series X. That's not really what that console's for, at least not in my mind. That is very much for Games Pass games. And I know that Games Pass games can be full of big AAAs as well, but it's not just about that on Games Pass, you know? If that's what you're really interested in, you're better off with a Series X. But if you just want to be part of the Games Pass ecosystem and have access to a lot of games all the time, basically, you know what I mean? Then I think that that's going to be a very popular option for a lot of people.
Absolutely. I mean, it's hard to see why it wouldn't be, particularly if the Series S is offering a kind of level of quality and a level of power that's broadly similar to what we are currently experiencing on the current gen systems, particularly those enhanced, you know, your Pros and your X's. If you're comfortable with that for most of your games just now, then the Series S is almost the perfect proposition in my mind, and that is basically why I'll be picking one up at some point, because it's playing games at the same resolution and the same power that I'm kind of currently doing it. I'll largely be playing AA and indie games through Game Pass, I will naturally dip in and try Halo when the moment comes, or try Gears 5 from a couple of years ago, and try the big exclusives, those big titles there. But I don't feel like I need those on the most powerful console, and there's just going to be so many people out there with that mindset that we have that can get in a way that they've just never have done before. That kind of pulls it all together, that there's so many options on the Xbox side. We've not even mentioned the all access, this ability to pay off the console over months. I mean, PlayStation haven't done anything with that, and that is again about letting people into the ecosystem at a level they can afford.
Which is a bad knock on PlayStation. They really should have had a response to that.
Exactly. I mean, it had been talked about for long enough. They could have proposed something. To go back to what I said before, I'm a little nervous about how the next generation plays out for PlayStation. I have to say I'm a bit less nervous really about what that looks like for Xbox overall, in relation to one another, I suppose is what I mean there. That the Xbox feels like it's only kind of got upwards to go, and it feels like it is moving upwards, whereas PlayStation has the potential to land in pitfalls if it doesn't continue the success it's had. And from what we've seen, I mean, we've barely touched on the games here, but from that big Xbox showcase, particularly back in the summer, there were some incredible looking games, I thought, some really interesting stuff, and we'll only have more to look forward to beyond that. I mean, what's your take on that, just on the game side for what we're seeing on Xbox?
Well, I still think that Xbox were struggling with exclusives, honestly, until Bethesda, and then that changed everything. And I mean, it's hard to argue with that. I mean, again, I know that we're up and down about whether or not exclusives are going to be happening or not on the Bethesda side. I still very much believe that they will be, and if they are, then I mean, they've got as good exclusives as anyone, as far as I'm concerned. I mean, they've got an absolutely fantastic catalogue of things just from Bethesda alone, and on top of that, you've got your Gears, your Halo, your Ori, your Fable, I mean, the Xbox have very suddenly got a very good exclusives library,
I totally agree with that. I mean, the improvements to the Xbox library in the last few years. I mean, we've not mentioned Hellblade here. That's one of our games of of this generation. Like, really, that'll
probably be the point where I buy a Series S.
If you haven't up until that point. I mean, it would definitely be close to that for me as well. If you are receiving your Xbox Series X or S, we're going to have to find a quicker way of saying that as we go forward. But if that is happening for you today or this week or in the next few weeks, I think you are getting a really exciting box at an exciting moment for the industry, which those boxes are kind of driving in a lot of ways. They are pushing the service side, the player side of what is happening in gaming just now. Obviously, PlayStation is really pushing the boundaries on the game side of it all. But yeah, I think Xbox, it cannot be what the last generation was. It already looks like it's not going to be that. And I think they're set up for a really exciting, positive and quite fascinating generation ahead.
Yeah, I couldn't agree more, man. I really think that Xbox have set themselves up really well to have a really good generation. Alright, Lewis, well, on that very positive note about Xbox, I'd like to remind everyone that you can find PlayersToo on all the social media. That's Facebook, Twitter, YouTube, Instagram, the lot. You can also find our written content over at PlayersToo.com. That's PlayerStoo.com. And if you could take 5 seconds to give us 5 stars over on Apple Podcasts or wherever you get your podcast, it really, really helps us out. It does a huge amount for the exposure of the show. And while you're over there, if you could leave us a little review as well, it really, really helps us out. I know I say this twice a week, every week, but it does not become less important on a weekly basis. And thank you so much to anyone that's already done that for us. It genuinely does mean a lot. I'd like to remind everyone that our play-along game for this month is Papers, Please by Lucas Pope. And I have not started playing it yet because I decided to start playing Mario 64 instead. But I'm very much looking forward to it. This is one that's definitely been on the list for a long, long time.
Yep, a great and not too long and really sort of fascinating and provocative game if you haven't played it yet. So definitely give this one a bash if you fancy it. Play along with us.
Absolutely, and let us know if you are. We're always interested to hear when people play along with us and what they think about the games. Alright, and with that, ladies and gentlemen, we will see you next week.
Thanks.